Welcome back, everyone, to the HUMHR Career Insights podcast. Welcome to season 4. This podcast is your guide to navigating career success in a world that's changing faster than ever. And I'm your host, Batje, certified professional career coach, human resources consultant, and founder of HUMHR. Whether you're just starting out, climbing the ladder, or choosing not to climb that ladder, or pivoting after years in the workforce, this podcast is here to equip you with the insights and strategies you need to thrive. So this season, we are challenging traditional notions of career success. We want to celebrate the courage to build something to build something new. And we also want to validate entrepreneurship and self-employment as legitimate, fulfilling career paths, especially for professionals emerging from the NGO and the UN ecosystems. Let's try and normalize career pivots for career reinvention, whether these stem from redundancy, burnout, or simple longing for flexibility and significant personal impact in your area of passion. We'll provide practical guidance, frameworks, and coaching moments for those contemplating the leap. Today, on our first episode, we have the startup coach, also known as Dennis Mhangami, or I don't know if Dennis prefers it the other way around. Dennis Mhangami, also known as the startup coach. I really couldn't think of a more fitting guest for our first episode this season, where we delve into entrepreneurship as a career choice. I will try and introduce Dennis, but I know he'll do a better job. So I'll read the script. Dennis is a serial entrepreneur, consultant, academic, venture builder, and coach with over 25 years experience across the fast-moving consumer goods and pharmaceutical industries in Southern Africa. After decades in corporate, he took a bold leap into the world of entrepreneurship, and today he helps others do the same. He also lectures on entrepreneurship at Wits Business School, where he bridges the gap between academic theory and the lived realities of starting up. In 2023, Dennis was recognized as Startup Coach of the Year, a testament to his dedication to helping African entrepreneurs build purpose-driven, resilient ventures. So today we're going to talk about that very journey, what it takes to move from employment to entrepreneurship, the mindset shift required, and why he believes entrepreneurship deserves to be seen not as a fallback, but as a career choice. Dennis, welcome to HUMHR Career Insights. Did I do a good job of introducing you?
Thank you. You almost overdid it.
Okay, so let's have you do it. You wear many hats, right? Entrepreneur, consultant, academic, coach. How do you introduce yourself when someone says, "Who is Dennis Mhangami?"
Thank you, Batje. It's great to be here, and great job on the podcast. The previous seasons, it's been great watching you for your journey. You actually said it. Usually say I'm a builder and I'm a bridge. So I help people to build ventures, and I bridge the gap between ideas and execution. That's really what I do. You know, I often say to my kids that I have the best job in the world because I get to see the future of Africa before everyone else does.
What shaped your journey into coaching startups?
So it really began with curiosity. You know, I've started my own businesses, you know, from my teenagehood. But when I actually delved into the world of entrepreneurship theory when I did my master's, I realized that there's a huge gap in terms of entrepreneurs not really having somebody to help them see around corners. And over the years, as an entrepreneur, I've had many entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs come to me to ask me how to get started, you know, what to look out for, how to do things properly. And so my passion for teaching and helping others really got me into coaching startups, and startups in particular, because it's very hard to move from, you know, an idea in your head to actually executing and hopefully succeeding. So yeah, I think just that curiosity and that desire to help others succeed and not fall into some of the traps and pitfalls that I fell into as I was building my business. I wish I'd had a coach. I probably would have done a lot of things differently, a lot of things faster, and a lot of things better.
Yeah, I wish I'd had a coach when I did
We all do it.
So I call myself, I think if I had to like use the tag, you call yourself a serial entrepreneur. I think I would probably call myself a serial idea of entrepreneur ideas. Yeah, something like that, because I have the most amazing ideas, and just going from ideation, to implementing is
Yeah.
something I feel like had I had a coach to bounce that off, I probably would be a millionaire by now with the ideas that I've thought of and then seen other people doing it and doing it well after many, many years. So, Dennis, I love your story. And I think that our listeners and now viewers too, maybe, but I think they would be interested in hearing about your maybe one or two of like the things that you started, something you built from new, right?
So my entrepreneurial career began in my teens. I think I must have been around 14, 15 years old. And I found an opportunity to make money out of compiling mixtapes for my friends at school. So I had the benefit of having a massive music collection and a double cassette deck radio. And so I started curating playlists for my friends and charging them. So they would bring their cassettes and I would record their music, usually after school or on weekends, and sell them to them for about $10 a piece. And, that managed to fund my rugby career in high school because my mom couldn't afford to buy me expensive rugby boots and gum guards and all the fancy things that come with the sport. So I guess that probably was my first, uh, dipping my toes into the entrepreneurial world. And since then, it's been side hustles when I was still an employee, right up to me, jumping out of corporate and starting my own ventures.
Yeah, that is really it inspires, but I find it interesting as well because I think I might have been a recipient. I might have been a beneficiary of that
You certainly were.
of that amazing hustle. And then so now stemming from that, right? You just mentioned side hustle and there's a lot of terminology. Now, from the startup coach, give us an idea. What would you say? What is a side hustle? What is self-employment and what is entrepreneurship? Is there a difference?
Right. There is a difference. And I think we need to kind of maybe define them first. So side hustle is effectively something you do on the side. It's an extra source of income or a passion project that you have alongside your main job or studies if you happen to be a student. It's characterized by being flexible and very low risk because you still have your main income. Right. And then self-employment is when you work for yourself, but your income depends mainly on your own effort and skills. So for example, a freelance graphic designer or a plumber or a consultant is self-employed because they basically earn money when they work. So that would define self-employment. Entrepreneurship, on the other hand, is about building systems that actually earn even when you're not directly working. So it's like setting up a business that eventually employs others, that sells products or manufactures products or runs on digital platforms. So you could basically say it's a continuum, and the continuum starts with a side hustle, which pretty much gives you flexibility and options. Self-employment gives you some level of independence, but entrepreneurship gives you scalability and impact. And that for me would be the difference.
Okay. Yeah. Like a steady. So that is almost like a career ladder. The ladder that we talk about that, you're going to corporate and you move up.
It's pretty much like that. Your side hustle can eventually become an entrepreneurial venture. And I've actually seen it live with some entrepreneurs who've started, a hobby which ended up becoming self-employment and now is a thriving business.
Is the difference in employing people or being bigger or for humor, for instance, to be able to move along without me there?
You can scale with people. So you could have a number of consultants who do the same work you've been doing, which allows you the freedom either to grow the business or at least to go on holiday while they do the work. And alternatively, you can also scale the business using technology. So are there any technologies that allow humans functions to continue without your personal intervention. Once you get into that realm, you're now in the realm of entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship really is about scale and about impact. So if you're able to scale beyond the borders, I mean, right now, you are able to reach more people. Anyone around the world can reach you, and you can impact a lot of people, but you become scalable when you yourself don't need to be behind the mic and behind the camera.
Listeners, so getting to know you a little bit more, you were named Startup Coach of the Year 2023. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How did you come up with that name? I remember seeing it and thinking, wow, that's fantastic. How did he even come up with that name?
So yeah, I actually didn't really come up with the name, but I started hearing it a few times when I was being referred to by people. I had kind of just started really formally coaching entrepreneurs, and they were like, yeah, I mean, that's Dennis, the startup coach. And I didn't have a name for the consulting firm at the time, and it kind of stuck. I decided to embrace it and build a brand around it. So the startup coach became not just a title, but it's now a platform. It's a space and the entrepreneurial community together to develop entrepreneurs in Africa. So our tagline is actually transforming Africa one entrepreneur at a time. That's how the name came about.
Welcome back, everybody. And if you are only joining us now, I have the startup coach, Dennis Mhangami, with us. And now I want to move us a little bit ahead to talk about implementing that idea. And we've already talked about the difference between self-employment, entrepreneurship, and a side hustle. Can you do both, startup coach, or all three?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And many people do. In fact, it's often the smartest way to start your journey into entrepreneurship. Having a job gives you some stability whilst you can experiment and learn from your side hustle. The key is really around managing your time and being clear around your long-term goal. If your side hustle grows to the point where it demands your full attention and can sustain you financially, that's when most people make the leap into full-time entrepreneurship. And it's not an either or anymore. I mean, in today's economy, multiple income streams are normal.
Yes. I asked that question because most of my listeners and most of the people that I coach are mid-career professionals from the humanitarian world. Some are in corporate, but mostly from the humanitarian world, from the UN, from the international non-governmental organizations. And I'm speaking to a lot of people who are thinking and considering completely moving out of employment. And some have had side hustles. Some have had ideas and are thinking, hey, is this the time to leap into this? How do I do it? And I find that one of the biggest barriers is the mindset. Let me just tell you, I'm sure you know my story, but just very briefly, that mindset shift that you have to take in that, okay, self-employment or entrepreneurship is sometimes considered the failing. I have failed in the corporate world, or I have failed in being an employee kind of thing. I've lost my job. What can I do? Fall back, back up. But so let's talk about that. Your thoughts. I've thrown a lot of things at you.
So let's begin with the fact that entrepreneurship should be a career choice. In Africa, we've tended to look at entrepreneurship as being that which somebody does when all else has failed. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it, because normally when that happens, people create what we call necessity entrepreneurship or subsistence businesses. So they really create those businesses as a means of survival. And entrepreneurship is the antithesis of that, because entrepreneurship is about finding a problem, creating an opportunity out of that problem, and really going out to solve that problem, and at some point in time, creating value out of it. And so from a mindset perspective, usually the biggest barriers are identity and comfort. Many mid-career professionals are deeply tied to their titles, their salaries, their routines, and they've actually built an identity around stability and expertise. But entrepreneurship requires you to start again as a learner and actually be comfortable with not having all the answers. Another big belief is that you need to have figured everything out before you start. The perfect idea, the perfect timing, enough capital. But in reality, entrepreneurship is about starting before you're ready and learning through action. And so the mindset shift is from security to experimentation. I often say entrepreneurship is literally building the plane as it flies.
I don't know if I like that imagery, because when I'm on that plane, I want to make sure that it's been built to stay up until we need to come down.
But the thing is, Batje, you are the pilot and the creator of the aeroplane. So you have to be in the air while you're building it. There's no other way of doing it. You're not a passenger.
I guess that's the mindset shift, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're talking about where
Yeah.
we're like, and can you do it? You have to. I think it takes a special someone or a special something, which brings me to my next question. Are you born with entrepreneurship blood or entrepreneurship DNA, so to speak?
Not at all. Until scientists and biologists discover a gene in the human DNA that differentiates an entrepreneur from someone who isn't, I will stand on my hill and say no. Entrepreneurship can be learned. It's a skill, right? Some people may have a natural appetite for risk or creativity, but entrepreneurship is actually a set of behaviors and skills. If you look at things like opportunity recognition, resilience, problem solving, adaptability, right? I've seen people who never saw themselves as entrepreneurial build some incredible businesses. Once they got the right exposure, the mentorship and coaching, the tools, it's like a muscle. The more you train it, the stronger it gets. And even in my own journey, I mean, I was an employee and I went into entrepreneurship, but every time I started a new business, I did it better, I did it faster, and made fewer mistakes. So you're not born with it.
Okay. So is that something you can teach someone? Is that part of the coaching?
Absolutely. So coaching and mentoring are part of the entrepreneurial journey. The coaching and mentoring part comes along where you bring your experience and expertise as a coach to help an entrepreneur. But there are a lot of things that can be learned formally. And that's why a lot of universities now have introduced entrepreneurship as a subject. At the Wits Business School, our MBA has an entrepreneurship elective. And then we also have a specialist master's in entrepreneurship and new venture creation, because there are a lot of things that can be learned. There's a lot of psychology involved. You look at things like financial modeling. But for entrepreneurship to be successful as a learning journey, you need to tie in the practice and the theory. That's the most important thing.
Okay. Not just having ideas and dabbling,
No.
and then moving on to the next idea and dabbling.
No. There's a systematic process that you must go through. And that's what we do, in my work in South Africa and in East Africa, is helping entrepreneurs actually go through that process. It's not a step-by-step process per se. It's very iterative, because you come up with a problem, but once you've come up with a problem, you need to go to the market and do some level of market and customer discovery to validate the problem. Once you validate that the problem exists, then you can build a solution based on the perceptions of the customers. And that's where that's where the magic happens. That's where you actually build something that people want. Whereas previously, a lot of entrepreneurs would dream up of stuff, create stuff, and then put it into the market. And, as Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And what happens is a lot of entrepreneurs come up with stuff in hiding, and then they bring it out to the market thinking it's going to set the market on fire. And the consumers look at this thing and say, we don't want it. So it's a learning journey. And the way we teach entrepreneurship, our philosophy is around what we call validated learning. So it's very iterative. You do things in small steps. And when those steps are not validated, you go back to the drawing board until you build something that actually works.
Yeah, that is very disappointing. I've done that where I'm like, hey, I've got this and I'm going to hide it and I'm going to do it and I'm going to get lots of sales. I was like, everybody is going to want this. Everybody.
And
yeah. I bring it out, and 1 or 2 sales later, and I'm stuck with all the stock. And I wound up giving it up as gift.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That happens a lot of the time.
Yeah. So you touched on something that a lot of the people that I coach, we go through this process where we talk about success. How do you define success, right? And purpose, the why. And we apply this to careers because I'm a career coach. So normally it's careers, right? And this became a tangent because of that, realizing that, hey, entrepreneurship is actually a career choice, Yeah. So success, purpose, and the why, right? What are your thoughts? How does this tie up with entrepreneurship? How does this tie up with starting a business or a side hustle? Yeah. Is purpose the most important thing, basically?
Absolutely. Because purpose becomes your North Star. So you need to really define the why. Why am I doing this? Why is it important? Why am I not doing something else rather than this crazy harebrained scheme? And success looks different for everyone. For some, it's financial freedom, the ability to control their time and income. But for most entrepreneurs, it's about purpose and impact. It's about solving a problem that matters and really going all out to pursue solving that problem. And inadvertently, if you're solving a problem, you're creating value for someone else. And if you're creating value for someone else, normally they will reciprocate by giving you value, right? So the value that a customer will give you is money, and you will give them a solution that helps make their lives better, or, whatever the case might be for the product. So success happens when you now have this virtuous cycle of the exchange of value between you and the market. So I personally define success in entrepreneurship as alignment. When your work, your values, and your lifestyle are all in harmony. Money is important. Absolutely. Don't get me wrong. It gives you options. But purpose gives you direction, right? And without purpose, the money alone rarely feels fulfilling. Honestly, I find great fulfillment in the work that I do simply by looking at how far some of the young people that I've helped have come. And I'm like a proud father of over 200 startups because I've just been witness to their journey, and I've been rewarded in the process financially. But, I think the personal fulfillment far outweighs the financial gain.
Okay, 2 things there. You were in corporate and you leaped into entrepreneurship. Was there a time you actually quit to run your own business or quit to follow your own purpose? And what steps did you take?
Right. So the first time I left employment, it was more of not really having great options left within corporate. At that time I was working in Zimbabwe, there was hyperinflation and the economy was just terrible. And I took a decision to pursue an opportunity. But, that particular venture was built under immense stress because there was pressure to basically start making money from day one, which proved to be difficult. And that's one lesson I always tell my coaches and my mentees, that if you're going to build a business that gives you money from day one, then chances are the next person can do exactly the same. Entrepreneurship itself is not easy. And then, when I went back into corporate briefly as I was launching the startup coach as a side hustle. And my transition from my last formal employment back into the consultancy space was very smooth. I mean, I would recommend anybody, particularly going into consulting, to actually do it as a side hustle to begin with, because I actually got to the point where I went to my boss and I said, I actually don't really work for you anymore. I've had this thing that I've been building for the last 18 months and it now requires all of my time and I need to leave. So really that transition into entrepreneurship, especially if it's sort of in the services and consultancy space, starting it off as a side hustle gives you a very soft landing. By the time I left my last job, I had an anchor client who basically was giving me more work than I could handle. And so it was a seamless shift from the workplace, the formal workplace, back into entrepreneurship. So those are kind of two examples from the same person, just The first time was kind of forced. And the second time I kind of eased myself into it.
Were you afraid?
It's always scary. I mean, nothing, they say nothing in life is certain but death and taxes. So yeah, it is scary. You do have to consider your personal circumstances, your own personal financial obligations. But like I say, when I did it the second time around, it was very comfortable because I had a pipeline of clients. I had more work than I could handle on the consulting side. So me freeing myself of employment, a formal employment, allowed me to take on even more work. And I must say, almost 5 years later, I haven't looked back.
Yeah. I think the greatest things come out of getting over fear. You mentioned that you've coached about 200 startups.
Well over 200, yeah.
Now, what common misconceptions do you still hear about what entrepreneurship should look like?
So there's a big misconception, particularly these days, that entrepreneurship is all about these tech startups. We keep hearing about fintech startups and edtech startups and agri-tech startups. And all of that is also linked to venture capital. So often people think if you're not building the next Uber or the next Airbnb and raising millions, that you're not a real entrepreneur. But entrepreneurship is much broader. It's running a bakery. It's launching a social enterprise. It's developing a niche product that services a particular clientele. Goals can be very different. And it goes back to your earlier conversation about the why. Because sometimes the why is somebody really has come up with a great solution and they want to give it to the world. So that entrepreneur is looking for scale, right? But another entrepreneur is saying, I want to bring about social change and make people's lives better. So the profit motive for that entrepreneur is not as high as the previous one I mentioned, but they still make impact. So entrepreneurship should not just be looked at from, what we see on social media when you see these founders raising millions and hundreds of millions and billions from venture capitalists. That is not the only form of entrepreneurship. Brilliant businesses being built that are not funded by venture capitalists. There are angel funders, family offices, private equity, even crowdfunding. So that's one misconception around entrepreneurship. On the other scale, the other misconception is that entrepreneurs live glamorous lives. And again, the media hypes up these things. In reality, it's messy, it's uncertain, it's humbling. You will meet your true self when you go into entrepreneurship. These highlight reels that we see on social media don't show the late nights, the rejections, the pivots that take place behind the scenes. They only show you the good side, or the easy side, rather.
Yeah, the easy side, because even like being in self-employment, the number of hours I work, we talk about flexibility, right? Yes, the flexibility is there, but to an extent, because the late nights are incredible. Sometimes you want to fit in, like, your kid's soccer match or something, right, during the day. So you shift things around so that you are working through the night to get that free moment. Whereas sometimes you think maybe being an employee is easy because you can just take a day off and go to the soccer match.
Yeah. But I wouldn't trade the opportunity to manage my own time for anything. I've been an entrepreneur for the better part of my kids' lives. So really, it's allowed me to be there and to be present because I could do a lot of stuff after hours. Whereas when you're in employment, your contract says 9 to 5. And so if your little bundle of joy has got a theater performance at midday, you might not be able to make it. So yeah, those are some of the benefits of having that flexibility.
Okay. Let me take you back to the passion thing, because I know this is something that we go back and forth with, sometimes with my coaches. And is passion, it's passion and money. We talked about financial freedom, right? And passion and solving a problem. Will the money follow the passion, or is passion a failure trap?
So I've never met a true entrepreneur who's not passionate about what they're doing. That that just goes without saying. Why is that important? Passion sustains you through hard times. It gives you clarity on your mission, and it also helps you to recruit others. You know, passion is contagious. So your first employees, when they see the zeal and the commitment that you have, it rubs off on them. So, so passion can be very helpful, but it can also be a trap, right? Because passion alone can blind you to market signals, right? Where founders stay attached to ideas that customers don't want. So follow your passion only works if that passion meets a real need. And so passion fuels resilience, but it must be married to evidence. So what evidence do you have that this thing that you're passionate about can create value for others and they can give you value in return from a financial perspective? So you really need to reconnect with your purpose. So I always help founders, entrepreneurs, by revisiting the original problem and the impact they wanted to create, translating purpose into measurable outcomes, right? Who benefits from this and how? And setting small purpose aligned experiments so that they get quick wins to restore that momentum.
Yeah. So your coaching focuses a lot on that purpose driven entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
What happens when the passion can no longer drive me?
Well, you need to find it again because that is the fuel. So normally, like I say, go back to the original problem, right? And think about the impact you wanted to create with the solution. How else can you do it? And you know, we now have the benefit of tools and methodologies that allow entrepreneurs to actually go back and change stuff. So my PhD is in business model innovation, and that's very passionate about it because what it involves is actually looking at the opportunity that you found and trying to find a different way of solving it. It's not always about a specific product or service. It could be a configuration of other solutions that can create the same value. For example, I have a startup in East Africa that originally wanted to help small scale farmers to mechanize. And their idea was to come up with miniaturized versions of agricultural equipment. So a smaller tractor, a smaller combine harvester, and try and sell these to farmers. And it wasn't working. And one of the things, and they were very dejected. And one of the things I went back to them to say, I said, if a farmer buys your planting machine, how often do they use it per year? And it turns out that farmers would use this implement twice a year. So I said, okay, so you expect a communal farmer to pay $2,000 for a piece of equipment that they're only going to use twice a year. Does that sound rational to you? And they were like, yeah, no, it doesn't make sense. So I then said to them, why don't you think of farming as a service? In other words, you retain the equipment and you actually lease it to the farmer for what they need to use it for twice a year, but that one piece of equipment can service 50, 100, 200 farmers. So you're no longer selling the equipment, but you're providing the service because the farmer actually doesn't want the equipment. They want a job to be done. And that job is either planting or harvesting or weeding or preparing the land.
Yeah.
And so we changed their business model. Are they still solving the same problem? Absolutely. But they're doing it differently. And the passion obviously has been reignited because now they have evidence that what they're doing is now creating value.
So sometimes it's just about changing one small thing, one small misstep in your idea or in and you still can focus on your purpose.
Exactly. Exactly. And honestly, the only way you can do that is by keeping, I call it the stethoscope, keeping your stethoscope on the market, understanding what customers are frustrated with. What is their problem? How can I solve it, right? Do I need to sell this to them or can I lease it out to them? Those are the questions you start asking yourself. But if you remain passionate about the problem, you'll always find a solution.
Okay. From ideation to providing that solution, how can someone test or de-risk, or can you even do that? You know, de-risk your business before committing, like before you quit your job, before like I'm going to take all my savings into this business. Is there a way to use that stethoscope to, okay, maybe not completely take out the risk, but de-risk basically?
So you're always going to have risk inherent in any business. Even the biggest businesses in the world carry some level of risk. market risk, political risk, technological risk, all sorts of risks. But how you manage risk in a startup environment or in a small business environment, or when you go from ideation, is that whole thing I talked about, validated learning. So let's use a simple example. Batje believes she's a great cook and ultimately she wants to open a gourmet restaurant. Cool. Now, for us to validate whether that could happen or not, Batje needs to go beyond making food for her immediate family and friends.
Yeah.
And actually cook food for complete strangers who are willing to pay for it. If she manages to do that, and manages to do that repeatedly, there is a fair exchange of value between her and her client, which means there's a virtuous cycle. So there's a business there. Now we just say to ourselves, how do we get Batje to now serve 500 plates a week instead of 20? And we can slowly grow into that before we even get to the point of saying, let's now take the risk of overheads. In other words, paying rent, buying all the equipment, employing all these people, and starting to market a gourmet restaurant. That's validated learning. And if you look at some of the most successful restaurants in the world, some of them actually started off as food stalls. And there was enough evidence that led somebody to say, you know what, I'm now going to put something together where people in their hundreds can actually make bookings and come and sit in my restaurant. Why? Because this food truck isn't working anymore. I'm missing out on an opportunity.
Yeah.
So those are the small experiments that you do that take you to a point where you've got enough evidence that you've got something that's surefire.
So do you think, so I understand startups, there's a failure rate of, I think, between 75% to 90%, which is extremely high. Do you think it's because entrepreneurs miss that step?
Yeah. In fact, one of the things when I teach, I always show this pie chart of some research that was done several years ago by Simon and Kucha Associates. And basically it was the reasons why startups fail. And the number one reason was a lot of startup entrepreneurs fail because they build stuff that nobody wants. Imagine that. One would think it would be funding and other things. Number two was hiring poorly. Can you imagine that? Like, money was something like number 7 or 8 on the list. And it was about running out of money on the basis of spending it on the wrong thing. But the number one is actually building stuff nobody wants. And that's usually driven by the fact that you go straight into building a product without validating what customers actually want.
Yeah, you get this great idea and you think customers really will want this and you just run with it with no, I guess that's the pose, right? How do you do that evidence? So I know you said, you do that process of like, you cook for the family and then you move on. But what if it's a product that you can't let out into the market? There's something about blue oceans, right? And also I was talking to someone and they say to me, I have a really great idea for a business. And I was like, what is it? And they're like, I'm not telling you. I'm not telling anyone because you're going to steal it.
The biggest difference between successful entrepreneurs and unsuccessful entrepreneurs is the ability to execute. However, you've got to get to a point where you know who your customer is going to be, where they are, and how much they're willing to pay for your product. Software, people do things like beta testing with users. When it comes to food products, people do a lot of what we call wet demos or sampling, where you get feedback from clients, right? Do you like this product? Do you like the texture? Do you like the taste? Do you like the smell? Is this packaging attractive? Does this label speak to you? All of that is validated learning. And customers will give you feedback. Somebody saying yuck to your product means it doesn't taste nice. And if you give out 50 samples and you get 40 yucks, guess what? You got to go back to the kitchen because people don't like it.
Yeah.
It's that simple. But I think the problem with entrepreneurs is that we are afraid to face the market. So we tend to want to be perfectionists at building a product so that we don't get rejected when we put it in the market. But unfortunately, that's what always happens. So give your product to people who need it the most in its most basic format. Let them give you feedback about what's missing from your product. And that is what we call validated learning. And I'm proud to say that a lot of my startups have follow that methodology. And it's tough. I mean, if people are interested, they must read this book called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. And it talks about this validated learning, lean startup methodology, where you make small improvements on your product based on evidence. So you may prototype a product and give it to people for free, but the feedback that you get is worth millions in terms of you not ending up making the wrong investment decision. So yeah, people make it sound like it's difficult, but it's not.
Yeah, I was about to say that it sounds so simple when you say it, you know? Yeah, it really sounds very simple.
Yeah,
but
and it is.
Yeah, but being on the other side of being a serial entrepreneurship idea failure. Lots of my ideas have failed. I don't know if it is that simple. So perhaps that's where the coaching comes into it, isn't it? Where it's like, let's look at like that basic example that you gave of the agricultural equipment.
Yeah. So that's where coaching becomes critical, in the sense that having somebody who's more experienced, who's done this before, I call it being able to see around corners, right? I've been around that corner, and when I came back, I had a black eye. So I can tell an entrepreneur not to go around that corner based on my experience. So this lessens their chances of failure because I've seen this happen. And that's the difference with entrepreneurship and a lot of other careers, where you really do need somebody to come alongside you and give you some guidance, because a lot of the time you're doing this for the first time and you don't know what to expect. And so somebody a little bit more experienced will be able to tell you, listen, you know what? Rather take the long route around this mountain than to try and climb over it, because when you get to the top, there's a sheer drop on the other side.
Yeah.
So and also, Batje, it's that thing about wanting to hold on to an idea and not talk to people about it. The more and more you talk to people about your idea, the better and better you refine it. Because people start poking holes, not in a negative way, but they start questioning your thinking around certain things. And so what you find in my methodology, particularly when I work with cohorts of entrepreneurs that are in a group, is that they constantly present their idea to myself and to the class, and I do an initial critique, and then I open it up to the class to do a class cohort critique. And the changes that take place a lot of the time are not attributable to me. They're actually attributable to their, fellow classmates. So it's very important to share your idea. If somebody can steal your idea and execute against it, it was probably very easy.
Is that the same with moving from self-employment to entrepreneurship? Can we use that same process from side hustle to self-employment, sharing your idea?
Absolutely. Talk to people. I mean, when I thought about going into entrepreneurship coaching in the manner in which I do it, so entrepreneurship coaching already existed. And I had a look at, different coaching models that are used. And I even at some point in time thought of taking a coaching course. But when I looked at it and I looked at what I wanted to create, the two were at cross purposes, because as an academic, I actually believe that things can be learned. But in the entrepreneurship space, you need to marry the learning with some doing. And in the learning and the doing, you need somebody or people who've done it before to make it really work. So, I mean, if I had to count the number of potential fatal mistakes that I prevented my coaches and my mentees from committing, geez, I would write an entire book about it. But they would know better because they haven't been through it, and I have the scars to show for it. So why not help them? So that shift from employment to side hustle, ease yourself into it. And that's the time to experiment, because it's not going to be fatal. You still have your job, you still have your salary, and you can afford to iterate and tweak and change things and see what works.
Yeah. Dennis, it's a lot. And, and of course, as a self-employed person, as an entrepreneur, as a side hustler, all those terms that we've come up with, it's like coming at me at all angles. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I think I made a mistake here, or I could do this, and I have all these ideas right now. And I think this is it's apt. It's like comes at the right time with everything that's going on in the work world, everything that's going on in the economies across the world. And there's 3 different areas that from our conversation, we're talking about the side hustle, and then we talked about self-employment and scaling that up, right? And my listeners, like I said earlier, I have people who are like in the in-between. Some are actually thinking of starting a side hustle with the thought of, hey, this could be what I do when I retire. Some are in the process of, I may need to go into self-employment, maybe as a consultant or something, given that I may not get a contract extension, or given that the possibility of my staying in employment for the next year or so is almost zero. Some are in that situation that you spoke about when you started your first venture, well, your second venture, where they've actually have lost their jobs and are thinking, oh my gosh, what do I do? Yes, I'm looking for work, but I do need the financial income, right? So would you be willing to come back in another episode to talk about the different, we can go specifically into talking to people who are wanting to start a side hustle, or specifically into people who want to do both?
Absolutely. I think it's an opportune time. The world is in flux. And honestly, I'm a real believer in human capital. I mean, at the core of what I do is human capital development. Coaching is and mentoring is developing human capital. And I think a lot of people sitting in their jobs have never actually taken stock of what their capital is worth. Just the amount of education and experience that they've amassed in their careers is worth a lot, but they don't realize it because they've never thought of how to monetize it. Their social network, their social capital is huge. And I only realized that when I had gone into entrepreneurship. And in fact, my master's topic was on human and social capital, because when I look back at my success, it was not because I had financial capital to start off with. I have some businesses that I started with literally no money, but I had a lot of experience, right? When I went into the beverage industry, as an entrepreneur, I had a lot of experience having worked for Coca-Cola. And I also had a lot of networks within retail, distribution, export markets, and putting those things together created value such that I was able to attract, my investors. Really taking stock of what you know and who you know is the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey. And that's where you realize that you're actually, as an individual, worth a lot.
I like that. The value I bring to an organization is the value that I can actually sell.
Absolutely. You are selling it while you're in your job. You get paid for it, but you just get paid a fixed amount.
Okay, startup coach. I appreciate the time that you have given to HUMHR Career Insights today. I'm really grateful. We have gone over the hour that I asked of you, and I know an hour it's a lot, right? People pay you a lot for that hour. So I am really grateful for you sharing the tips, advice with our listeners today. And before we go, if you could just share one thing, what's the one thing that you would say to a professional who has lost their job and is afraid to start something new?
I think it goes to my last statement, where I'm just saying, just take a step back and just take stock of what you know and who you know, and think around who could benefit from that. And I believe that that will be the beginning of you kind of unlocking that mental model of employment. The fact that you were employed meant you were doing something valuable for your employer. Who else could you do that for? And believe me, there are many, many opportunities for you to add value to yourself. So yeah, don't go diving into the first thing that comes to mind. Think about it. Do your research. Talk to people. If it's an idea, no one's going to steal that idea from you. They're just going to sharpen it and sharpen your thinking. And yeah, baby steps. Don't bet the house. I've seen that happen a lot of the time, where people leave their jobs, they get a severance package or, a golden handshake, and they throw it in a pot in a Hail Mary attempt at basically trying to see if they can fund their lifestyle. Entrepreneurship, unfortunately, doesn't work that way. So it's got to be small incremental steps, evidence-based, and you will be okay.
You will be okay. I think that is the apt ending to our conversation. And I look forward to our next episodes. And once again, thank you very much. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us today. And until next time, stay inspired.
Thank you.